Hello everyone. Say hi in the chat. Let's see who's here. Thank you for voting. I see there's a few members here, and I'm glad to see that the votes have been yes and no. Fine, we're going to go through some database stuff, so don't worry if you have or have not done it. It doesn't matter either way. I was just thinking that if everyone has done it, that's um, yeah, yeah, Firestore database or Firebase authentication, any of those services or tools, if you've used it before, reply yes or no in the chat. Hi, Elzo. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right, while you guys answer yes or no if you have used Firebase or not before, I will get started. So today's live stream is about adding a database and basically using it with AI coding. And to do that, we're going to be using MCP. So what are we going to be talking about? We're going to introduce the tools first. And this is just to get everyone on the same page. So I'll be able to breeze through some of this stuff if you have done it before. Oh, one thing before I continue any farther. If you cannot see the slides at any point, please let me know. Because last time there was a segment, I don't know how it happened, but suddenly I wasn't presenting slides and I was just talking and you guys weren't able to see the visuals. So if there are no slides and I'm not demonstrating code, then please let me know through the chat because it's either those two things. I'm not just going to be talking to the camera with nothing shown. All right, continuing on. We are also going to be setting it all up and then using it with AI. And depending on time, we can see how far we want to go with doing it with AI. And then some Q&A at the end. Okay, so introducing the tools. What's a database? For the people who have not done the databases course, very quickly, essentially allows you to store data that you can later retrieve. So for example, if you have a calorie tracker, it would kind of be useless if you tracked some calories and then when you restarted the app, the data that you logged was gone. But we need to be able to store that data. And this is usually called persistence or persistent storage. And a database allows us to store that data across different app sessions. Now, in this scenario that I'm talking about, a local database would suffice. A local database means that that data store sits on your phone or your device. And you might have used this already through app storage, where we store some simple values, maybe user preferences and settings and things like that. Or you may have used Swift data and core data, which is still local storage. The database sits on your device, but it's a little more robust. It's meant for querying, storing larger amounts of data, and things like that. So you might have used those things in the database course or maybe on your own. But then there's remote databases. And this means that the database is not on your device, but it sits on a server somewhere. And what that means is that when your app launches, it needs to connect to that server to be able to access that data and to be able to store data on that server. The benefit of this is that multiple instances of your app, which could mean multiple users, different users, they can access the same set of data. So for things like Instagram, things where you have user-generated content that everyone is meant to see, you would definitely need something like a remote database so that all the users can connect and access the same set of data. If it's local database, then only you can access that data. Now, here's just a visual diagram very quickly of local versus remote. So local, you can see the database on device. Remote, multiple users can access it. And this little flame icon, this just means Firebase, which leads us to Firebase and why we would want to use it. So we talked about, oh, sorry, we're right here. Okay, so for those people who have not used Firebase before, it's a popular set of mobile app tools and services. It's owned by Google. And one of those services is a remote database called Cloud Firestore. database. And the reason why this is so popular is because it's free to use until you hit their free tier, which, I want to say it's pretty generous, but to be honest, I have not gotten an app so popular that I have to start paying for this. So I think a lot of people, they start using this. Now, um, before I show you an example, let me say why someone would want to use a Firebase, Firestore database instead of just setting up their own server and setting up and hosting their own remote database, because that is something you can do. And the reason for that is because it takes time and technical expertise. You have to know how to set up server infrastructure. If your app gets popular and you're going to need to know how to scale that up and things like that. So there's just a different set of skills that are required if you want to set this up yourself. So there's what's known as a backend as a service, which is what Firebase is. And it basically handles all of that for you, takes away all of that work, and just lets you easily get set up with using a remote database. Okay, so that's really nice. And, oftentimes when you're starting a new project and you're starting your own app, you want to move fast because you don't know if it's going to be successful. So you don't want to invest as much time and effort um, into all the different pieces. So this is a nice way to get started. I wanted to show you an example for those people who haven't seen it before. So for example, it looks something like this. So this is just a demo app that I've been working on a little bit on the side, and it's to capture feedback. So in when you launch an app, you definitely want to hear from your users about what to improve. And I thought um, it'd be a cool way to use Firebase to capture user data. I know there are some services out there that let you do this, but you have to pay for them. So I was thinking about creating my own. So it looks like this. There's If you've never seen, let me make this bigger. If you've never seen um, Cloud Firestore before, it's organized in a way that may not be intuitive for you if you've used traditional databases that look like a table and a spreadsheet. It's got like rows and columns. The way that Firestore database works, it's more of like a file system on your PC or your Mac. So you have collections, which is kind of like a folder. And inside your collection, you have different documents. And each document stores information. So I have a feedback collection or folder. Inside that, I have a single document. This is just an ID. And inside that document, I have a piece of feedback for this feedback capture app. You can see I have fields like app version, category, device model, that sort of thing. So that's how data is stored inside Cloud Firestore. Now, we understand all of the pieces. Right? We have an app. It connects to the database. It can push data or store data into this database. It can also retrieve data, and you can perform queries on this and pull it back into the app to display it on the screen. What's the problem with working with databases, remote databases specifically, with AI? Well, the problem is that AI doesn't have access to your Firestore database. It's through this admin panel that you're working on it. And so when you're using AI in your app, whether through Cloud Code or Cursor, or the AI assistant, it can't log in as you and manipulate all of this and also see what your data schema looks like. But that's where MCP comes to the rescue. And let me just end this poll really quickly. I want to hear from you guys. Who has worked with MCP before? Have you used MCP before? Okay, let me know yes or no. There's a new poll. Okay. Very briefly, in case we have people who have not used MCP before, let me explain what this is. So you have your AI coding client, whether that's Xcode with the AI assistant or anti-gravity. Um, it cannot connect to these tools and services that you see on the right side of the screen. You see Dropbox, Gmail. It can't connect to your inbox and grab your email. So MCP is a way for it to actually have access to that. You can think of it as a communication standard. So through this agreed upon standard, you have a server. This server does have access to those tools, um, but it communicates back and forth with your client through this communication standard or protocol. And because there's a standardized way of communication, the client can send a request to the MCP server and say, like, hey, I want to retrieve all the email and all the subject lines. And the server can return that information in a way that the client can understand. And then that in this manner, the AI can get access to different tools and services. And that is how um, we are going to be using Firebase to give our AI coding client access to our cloud Firestore. What happened to poll? Oh, okay. That's great. That I'm glad this is new material, so it's not boring. So many of you have not used MCP before. So this is what it is. All it stands for is it's a communication protocol. But how you actually use it is there are many different MCP servers out there, all with different accesses to different tools. And you just have to specify in your AI client the address of the specific server that you want to use. Um, so Firebase has an MCP server right here. So this is an official Firebase MCP server. So that means that you can trust it, hopefully. You do not want to be adding random MCP servers that you find on the internet because through this MCP protocol, in order for, let's say, this MCP server to retrieve your email, you actually have to give credentials, or not give credentials, but log in like an authentication token to your MCP, to that MCP server, so that it can go and get stuff that is relevant to you. And so it's important to use as much as possible the official MCP servers by the platform or service that you're trying to use. So this is the official MCP Firebase server. And there are instructions on how to add it, and we'll be adding it soon. But I want to scroll down a little bit because it tells you what tools it gives your AI coding client. So it has, let me make this a little bigger in case it's hard to read. It has login and logout, which is important because you want to be able to get your Firebase projects, right? And your Firebase databases. It can get specific projects. It can list all of the apps in a specific project because you can have a remote database, but then you can have an Android app, an iOS app. You can have different apps in the project and a whole bunch of other things. I'm not going to go through it one by one. Here are some important ones. Get documents. This is retrieving data, right? Deleting data, listing the different collections. Remember, those are the folders in your database. And also working with Firebase authentication. Now, another uh, feature or product that is part of the Firebase platform is authentication, which means login screens and accounts and things like that, which is usually goes hand in hand with databases because you want to authenticate your user before you give them access to certain pieces of data. You don't just want to give any app that connects to the database access to all of the data, right? And so those two things usually go hand in hand. And so Firebase authentication is what we want to use for account creation and keeping track of users. We'll see some examples of that. All right, now let's talk about which AI tools you can use with MCP, um, where you can add an MCP server, because not all AI tools have it. Most of them do. So Anti-Gravity, Claude Code Cursor, they all do. Xcode, the AI assistant inside Xcode, and Xcode itself, it doesn't have MCP server support. Unfortunately, maybe they're going to add it in the future. But I have read on the interwebs that people have a different way of doing it through a bridge or something like that. I haven't looked too much into it. But for my AI coding, I have been using Claude Code, and that's what I highly recommend you to use as well, because it seems to be way better than the other things I've used. So I've used Cursor quite a bit. I've used the Xcode AI assistant quite a bit, and I just in those cases, I always felt like there was a little bit of wrestling and going back and forth with the AI, like do this, and then it would do it, but it wouldn't be quite right, and I have to go back and forth with it. Whereas with Claude Code, um, there have been very little errors, and especially with the Opus model. So I'll be showing you how to set it up with Claude Code. Okay, so everyone still see the screen, everything's good? Okay, so first we're gonna go through these steps. We're gonna set up our Firebase. This, I think this will be really helpful because we're gonna do this manually, and you're gonna see how to connect your Xcode app to a cloud Firestore database. If you haven't seen this before, you haven't done this before, I think this is gonna be pretty magical. So first, we're going to create a Firebase account. We're going to set up an Xcode project. We're going to create the app inside the Firebase account. We're going to then add our Xcode project to it. And then we're going to set up some configuration to connect our Xcode project to the new database. And then we'll do a sample database operation, and you'll see the data show up on the other side. So to sign up for an account, again, it's free. You go to firebase.google.com and you can then sign in with your Google account in the upper right corner. And once you do that, you'll probably be brought to a screen like this. Yours might be different if it's the first time and you don't have any projects, but I mean, there should be a button to say create a new Firebase project. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to call this Firebase MCP. And I'm not going to join the developer program. And I'm not going to enable Google Analytics because this is a demo. And you might be using other analytics software anyways. So create project, it's going to take a little while to do that. While it's prepping that, it doesn't take too long, maybe a minute. But while it's prepping that, let's create our Xcode project. All right. Just want to double check I'm still sharing my screen. So I'm going to call this product or project Firebase-MCP, Swift UI and Swift. And I'm not going to pick any storage system there. I'm just going to hit next, and I'm going to save it in my app portfolio folder. All right, so just like that, I have a brand new project. What's important to note, what you're going to need is that app ID. So right here, it's com.codewithchris.firebase-mcp. We're going to need that in a second. So let me just copy that. Okay, so back to Firebase, it's ready to go. Let's click continue. And now we have our Firebase project. Inside this Firebase project, we can enable all of these different capabilities that this platform offers. So under the build tab, you can see there's all of these different features that we can enable for our app. Storage, hosting, functions, authentication, that's the account creation stuff that I told you about. Analytics down here, it's actually quite a bit of tools that you can use. What we want to go down to is Firestore database right here. But actually, I'm ahead of myself. Yeah, so the Firebase project, you can enable all of those capabilities for your app. But before you do that, you have to add your app to the project. You can add multiple apps. You click this button here because you might have an Android version, you might have an Apple version, like an iOS version, you might have a website a version of your app. And all of those apps can read the data and store data um, to and from this remote database. So that's really nice because then all of your different clients can see the same thing. But we're going to add an iOS app today. So click on iOS and we're going to go through a little bit of a wizard. There's a little bit of a setup process. We're going to paste our Apple bundle ID here. You can ignore the other two, especially if you don't have an App Store ID yet, and that's fine. It's going to register this app, and then it's going to give you a configuration file, which you have to add to your Xcode project. So you can see here, it asks you to download it and then save it inside where all of your Swift files are, like your, it's funny, it's still using UI kit here, storyboard. They didn't really update the screenshot, but let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to download Google service-info.plist, and I'm going to go into my app portfolio folder, Firebase-MCP, inside this folder. You see where all of these files are? That's where we want to save it. Also, because I already had one of these files on my desktop, it added a bracket 1, but I want to get rid of that and just save it in that folder. Now we're going to open up Xcode and you check the files on the left-hand side, the file navigator. If it's not there, then you're going to want to open it up and find the folder where you saved it. And then you're going to want to just drag and drop it into Xcode. And if it asks if you want to create a copy inside the project folder, say yes. But you saw me just save the file here and it automatically appeared in the file navigator here. So we can click next. Now we have to add the Firebase SDK. And this is what makes it really easy to use this because by adding this Swift package, it gives us functions to call to just save and retrieve data. So let's click on Xcode. We're going to go to add package dependencies. This is where it can get a little bit confusing because there are a lot of different packages that you can add because Firebase offers so many different tools and services. But all you need if you're just using Firestore right now is the Firestore library. And if you don't know, you can click on Go to Docs on this screen. It's going to launch a new window. And you're going to be able to, well, here it's just going through the basic setup steps that we're going through right now. But what I'm looking for specifically is here, if you scroll down, depending on what product or service you want to use, it tells you what libraries to add. So if you scroll down to Cloud Firestore here, it tells you to add Firebase Firestore. That's the package library that we want to add. So going back here, you can see there's so many different ones, right? But what we want to add is Firebase Firestore here. And we're going to add to target, choose our target, and say add package. Okay, it's going to add it. And then we can go back to the setup step. So we just finished this. And then we have to add this initialization code. Now, there are just a few lines here. There's this line, importing Firebase core. There is adding this app delegate so that when it launches, we can run Firebase configure. Also, you can choose Swift Objective-C or Swift UI. So just choose Swift UI. So let's import Firebase core. And also, we're going to copy that. Going back to our project, this is the hardest part. We're almost through. So Firebase core, and we are going to paste that app delegate that we had. Don't worry if it doesn't recognize the libraries or the classes right now, because when you build the project, it will. It's just indexing a lot of files right now. Okay, under here, register the app delegate for the Firebase setup. We can copy that line here, and that goes right there. And now if you press Command B, it will build and hopefully it will compile successfully. If it doesn't, then perhaps double check where you've copied and pasted this code, but it should build successfully. Here, we can just click Next and then continue to console. So you'll see your new app here. Okay, now let's try to add some data. So, actually, we have to set up the database first. Let's go to Build, and we're going to set up Firestore database. Okay, we're going to hit Create Database. We're going to choose Standard. I don't think any of us were doing Enterprise. Barbara, yes, you would have the recording. Yeah, it's going to be perpetually available in the recordings section. Let's click on Next under Standard. And we don't have to change anything about the database ID. Location, you can choose your closest location. Notice that after you set this location, you cannot change it later. I would just choose the closest place to you. I think that would be the best, or the closest place to your users, perhaps. Basically, it would reduce latency by a little bit. Start production or start in test mode. So this one is important. So in test mode is basically where there are no security rules on your database. Anybody who has the right connection details can connect to it and retrieve and store data. And it will only be active for 30 days. Otherwise, it will then flip the switch to production mode. Whereas production mode, it's private by default, but then you're going to have to modify the security rules. So I would recommend starting in test mode. And the reason I say that is because if you start in production mode, um, and you're trying to get your app to connect to the database, you're wrestling with two things. You're wrestling with, do I have the right code in my Xcode project to connect to the database? And if things aren't working, right? If things aren't working, there's two things that you are going to start to wonder. You're going to wonder, is your code correct? Do I have the right code? And B, are my security rules the culprit? Do I need to work on that? Whereas if you start in test mode, if something is not working, you can't retrieve data or you can't store data, then the only thing that can be wrong is the code in your project. It just eliminates possibilities of things going wrong. And so if you can then get your code working, it's storing and retrieving data properly, then you can go flip the switch into private mode. And if things stop working, then you know it's the security rules that you need to adjust and fix rather than your code. So I hope that makes sense. It's just, I think tackling one thing at a time, like making sure one thing works before you introduce another variable, is my preferred way to do things. So I'm going to start in test mode. I'm going to hit create. It is going to do its thing. And in the meantime, I want to bring your attention to another set of documentation. So we were here. This is the documentation we're looking at. If you go up to build and you go to Firestore, which is what I've done here, here. Yeah, I'm under Firestore right now. And if you go under manage data, I know it's buried under so many different things, but don't worry, these links will be in the last slide. So you'll jump here. Add data. This is where it shows you some code to add some data. And this is what I want to show you. So you can choose Swift. I'm We're going to scroll down to set a document. Okay, and you can see the code is um, you can specify a specific collection, which is like a folder. You can specify a specific document, which is like a file, and then you can set the data inside of the document. So right now, our database looks like, let me just close some tabs so I don't get confused here. Which tab was our database? Oh, here it is. This is our Cloud Firestore database. It is brand new. It is empty, right? There are no folders. There are no documents. Let's try to add something to this. Here is the bits of code that we need. So up here, you see that we need to first, let's go up here. Okay, we need to import Firebase Firestore. Then we need to create an instance of this. This handle gives us, I think all of the database operations, they go through this right here. So we can give that a try. Here, I'm going to copy this line of code. Actually, inside Xcode, is it still building? Okay, inside the content view, I'm going to add a button. I'm going to say add. And then this is where I want to add data to the database. Just so we're going to test if this works. So we're going to import Firebase Firestore. We're going to create a property up here. Yes, we're going to create a property up here. And then when the button is tapped, we can say db dot. It's not going to show me the autocomplete because it hasn't finished indexing all the stuff. But essentially, this is what we want to do, just as a test. When I say db.collection, it doesn't matter what the data is right now. So I'm going to copy that part. What this is going to do is it's going to create this folder, which is a collection called cities. It's going to create a document in that folder. I should just say collection and documents so I don't confuse people. I'm just going to say collection, which in your mind, you should think folder. Documents are files that store data, and then the actual data inside. So it's going to create a collection called cities. Inside, it's going to put a document called LA. That's going to be the ID of the document. And it's going to set this data. Name equals Los Angeles, state California, and country is USA. And inside the database, you'll see that we don't have a folder called cities or a document for that matter. But if it doesn't exist, it's going to create it. So now we can run this, and then we can click on the button. And hopefully, if everything is set up correctly, we're going to see this data appear. Now, I know we haven't actually used the Firebase MCP server plugin yet. We haven't added it to our AI client. We haven't done anything AI. But I think just going through this whole process manually, you will then appreciate or at least understand what AI can take away from the manual process. So this is going to take a while to build. In the meantime, let's take a look at the MCP server. Okay. So this link will be on the last slide. If you come here, there will be different clients that you can select from. So we know at a baseline, these clients support MCP server, right? I'm going to use Claude. There are two different ways to use it with Claude Code. I recognize that some of you may not have used Claude Code before, so I will go a little more slow. And plus you'll get to see how it can be used. But no matter, so yeah, the tough part is that each different client has a different way of adding the MCP server to the client. And so whichever one you're using, you're just gonna have to click into the tab and follow the instructions. For Claude Code, it's actually really easy to add because you just copy and paste a couple of lines of code. So I'm going to do it this way. So for those of you who have not seen Claude Code in action, um, this is how it works. It works in your Mac terminal, and let me just make this a little bigger. So through this command line interface, you are going to be talking to the AI, and it is going to be manipulating the Xcode project files on your file system. First, you have to navigate to the folder for the files that you want to modify. So let's let's navigate to our project folder. If you have not used Terminal before, I'm going to go a little slowly so that you can understand. There is a little bit of knowledge that you need right now in order to just navigate around the folder system using the command line. So ls is for listing all of the folders in the current directory. And so right now I am in my Chris directory. That app portfolio folder is where I want to get into. And to change directories, cd space the folder name. So I'm going to choose app, and I'm press tab to autocomplete. But because there are several different folders that start with app, it's going to allow me to cycle through them. Hit tab again, it's going to allow me to choose app portfolio. I'm going to hit enter. And now you can see that my current directory is app portfolio. If I hit ls again to list the folders and documents in there, you'll see that these are all of the different folders I have. There's Firebase MCP, the folder of our project. So again, I'm going to change to that directory. I'm going to hit cd space Firebase. Now I don't have to type the whole thing out. I'm going to hit tab to autocomplete. There it is. I'm going to hit enter. And now you can see I'm inside that folder. If I hit ls again to list the files, you'll see that I'm in the right one. Okay, so this is still not Claude Code yet. This is just the command line interface. Now I can launch Claude Code by typing in Claude. You had to have installed Claude Code before you can just hit Claude and launch it like this. So that's outside of the scope of this live stream, but I'll show you very quickly how you can actually do it. So yes, I trust this folder, which is going to allow Claude Code to do things in here. Okay, so here I'm in Claude Code, and it is looking at the folder. You can see there, my project folder. I'm using the Sonnet model right here, and now I can actually talk to the AI and type a bunch of various things. If you don't have Claude Code installed, if you typed Claude and hit enter, it would just say command not recognized. You had to have installed Claude Code, and the way you install it is very, very easy. So you just open up Terminal like you saw me do, and you copy in this line and you paste it and you hit enter. And that is going to install Claude Code for you on your system. So then you can just navigate to your project, change directory, your project, just what we just did, and then hit Claude. And then that starts Claude Code. Okay, so now that we have Claude Code launched, before we follow these instructions to install the MCP server, let's switch gears back to our Xcode project and see if this has launched. Okay, so it has launched, and I can hit add, and that would have run the code here to add this document to the database. If we go back here, perhaps we need to refresh this. We should see, yeah, so there's the cities collection, and inside there's the LA document, and in here there's these data value pairs, key value pairs. You can even edit the data straight from here. You can edit the field, you can change it like that. You can add a document yourself. So this is kind of like an administrative interface. Um, so yeah, I think that was pretty cool. We went through the process of setting up a Firebase project, Xcode project, connecting the two, and then sending data here. Okay. Let's go back to adding the MCP server so that we can start using AI. So we did a little bit of connecting. We did a little bit of talking about how to set up Cloud Code. And now we're inside our project folder with Cloud Code. Coming back to here, all you have to do is copy and paste these different lines, these 3 lines one by one, hitting enter. I did this before, so I can just copy this last one to verify the installation. All it will ask you is, do you want to install this or not? All right, so it'll check the MCP servers and what resources are available. And then it says, I have the Firebase MCP server configured. All right, so you know you installed it properly. Next, what we need to do is to log in so that it can actually find our project. So what we type in is Firebase login. Now this part, it will give you a URL to paste into your browser, and then it'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then you have to paste something back here. So I don't know if I have to do this again because I did it before, but let me just unshare my screen because I'm worried about unintentionally leaking some information. So let me just try typing in Firebase login here and see what happens. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, let me know. Oh, okay. So it says I'm already logged in. I'm just going to log out, Firebase log out, because I do want to show you this login procedure. Okay. So now I can hit Firebase login again. Here, I'm going to share my screen now, Firebase. All right, so I had to log out. I'm going to hit Firebase login now, and it's going to give me a browser URL to type in. Yes, I want to proceed. So here are the instructions. I'm going to paste this into my browser. I'm going to do it here. You choose the Google account that you signed into Firebase with. And then it's going to ask for the password. Let me just type that in. Okay, so here I'll show you how it looks. So after pasting in that URL and choosing the Google account that I used with Firebase, it's asking me if I want to do this, and hit continue, and you give it permission to access my Google account. So this is the strange part. Yes, it can be a Google Workspace account, Barbara, because the one I'm using is actually a Google Workspace account as well. So this part, before continuing, let me make this bigger. Confirm that you just ran the following command in the terminal. So this is the part that you may not, it may be a little bit confusing because you might not have explicitly typed that out, but what you did is you told Claude Code to log in, and Claude Code did that for you. So this is just security in case you didn't initiate this, but we just did. So I'm just saying I ran that. And then the other thing is you want to match the session ID, confirm the session ID matches the one from CLI. So CLI is a command line interface. So this is the command line interface. It is matching that C6987. I'm going to say yes. And then the last thing is to copy this and paste it in here and then hit enter. And you only have to do this once. After you've done this once, every time you boot up your AI editor again, you don't have to go through this process. Okay, so now we're done. I can just close this. And if you go back to this Firebase, let's click on project overview, or actually click on this gear icon and go to general, because every Firebase project, it has a ID. So here's the ID for my project. And want to verify that Claude Code or whatever AI editor you're using can see it. So I want to say, can you see this Firebase project? Or you could say we're using this Firebase project to be more direct and productive. So Barbara is asking, is Firebase the preferred method to store data for iOS? Okay, hold on. Let me just hit yes here. Okay, yes. Okay, perfect. So it can see that project. So now we know that Cloud Code has access to here. You can ask it, well, what collections or documents do I have? Okay, in the meantime, let's go back and answer your question, Barbara. So in terms of local databases and remote databases, right? Local, I think the preferred way is still Swift data. And for some hardcore users who think stuff is lacking in Swift data, they might use core data instead. But Swift data is supposed to be the way forward, the future. So every year, Apple is improving Swift data, but it is kind of built on top of core data, which is the dirty secret. But in terms of remote databases, there are two that are popular. So one is Firebase, which we've been going through here. The other is actually Superbase, and I have it in a tab window because I wanted to mention this as well. So again, this also has a free plan. So Firebase is Google's platform. Do with that information what you will. I don't know if you like Google or not. Superbase is a private company. It also has authentication. It probably doesn't have as many things as Firebase because Firebase is a much more mature platform. It's been around longer. But I see a lot of developers also using Superbase. Maybe this is something that, like, I don't have a strong opinion or knowledge on which one is better. But what I can tell you is maybe it depends on how you prefer to use it. Sorry, let me rephrase that. What type of database you're used to? Because the way Superbase works is it's more table oriented. Let me see if I can show you here. As easy as a spreadsheet. It's got SQL. So this is your more traditional database in terms of, mm, well, I don't know what traditional means, but in the past, when I first got exposed to databases, things were in columns and rows. You had different tables for different things, and you can run SQL queries and things like that. This is what that is. That Sorry, having trouble with my words. Whereas Firebase is a NoSQL database solution. It's organized in terms of like folders and files, collections and documents. I mean, um, both of these are pretty popular. This is not like an inferior product, so don't think that. There's lots of developers who use this. Oh, sorry, Barbara, it's not Elzo. That was you who asked it. Sorry, I just misread the name there. But hopefully that answers your question, Elzo. Okay, so where we're at here, uh, this took a little longer than I have expected. So we're here. We have completed connecting Cloud Code to MCP. So now, what this means is that when you're using AI, you can tell it like it has access to the data in your database. Um, so you can ask it to create data, you can ask it to retrieve data, and then when you're building your project, it has context of your database schema as well. So it can make, as it's like writing the code in your Xcode project, it can write those queries in the proper way. What is it trying to do here? It is trying to list all my projects. Oh, okay. I'm going to switch gears because I want to show you a little bit of this stuff. So using it with AI. So we've successfully given our AI access to our remote database. Well, now how do you build the app? How do you actually use AI? And this then goes a little bit into a vibe coding workflow. All right. So this is something that I plan to share in more detail inside the. I don't know if you guys noticed, there's a new courses tab here. There are right now just the Learn iOS track, but there is going to be an AI only track. And I plan to show you guys this sort of workflow that I'm about to show you here. So since we're a little bit short on time, I'm not going to type all of this stuff out. I'm just going to run you through it a little bit. So what I like to do in terms of vibe coding an app is to plan it out with Claude in the browser or whatever AI tool you use. So this could be database design. This could be like the app navigation. This could be how the UI looks. But you do all of that planning and tweaking inside a chat window. And when it looks and functions, not really functions, but like all of the details and the requirements are what you want it to be, then you ask it to create a Claude file. These are the guardrails for the AI to follow best practices in terms of iOS app development, in terms of database design, and all of that stuff. And then also to create an implementation plan that the AI is going to follow and build it step by step. You also want to combine that with source control so that you can revert and you wouldn't have to start all over if something messes up. And UIS screenshots, I'll tell you what that means in a second. So I'll show you an example of what I mean here. So a simple database app. I was thinking about doing a shared grocery list app just as a demo to demonstrate Firestore database. So I had a couple of requirements I listed, and it's kind of hard to read here, but I said create an account or login with username password using Firebase authentication. Users can create or delete different lists and add and delete different items to the grocery list. And then the lists are tied to a specific account so that you can't see other people's grocery lists. So I asked, what's the best way to structure the Cloud Firestore database for this app? And so it's talking to me about how the collections should be, how the documents should be, what we should use for that, and it's saying why it does that, and then security rules example. So this is where you have the opportunity if you want to learn something and you want to understand how or why, you can ask things like, I'm new to Firestore database. Can you explain it very simply for me? And then it can break it down. It tells you collections are like folders, documents are like individual files, and then the fields are like so then it starts explaining that this design decision to you in very simple terms. So here's how it would look for your grocery list app. Um, Here's how it would work. When the user taps on a new list, it would create a new document in the lists collection so that when you're reading this, you can visualize as the user uses your app, how it would work in this context, right? And so you continue to chat back and forth. Um, the one piece of advice I'll give you is that, and this goes with any database, is that the more you have planned out your app, the better you can design the database upfront. Because once you put data in there and then you change the requirements of your app, and I guess it's kind of inevitable if you add new features, you might need to change how the database structure is. But it becomes harder when there is already data in the database for you to change the structure. So if you can spell out as many of the requirements as possible right now, and you can think about how your app, like how is phase one going to be, phase two, or V1, V2, V3, that sort of thing. In the future, I want to be able to do this and that. Um, then we can design the database schema or structure to accommodate all of that so that in the future we reduce the need to have to restructure that schema with data, having to manage the data already. Yeah, that goes with local databases, remote database. Like this is just in general working with databases. So when you're talking with AI, the more you can think through your app first, think about all of the requirements up front, the better we can plan out how the database should be. So let's say that you talk about the requirements. The next step, so coming back here, talking about database. The next thing I would talk about is app flow. If you have a strong idea of the screens you're going to want, how the user is going to navigate between the screens, then you say it. You say it right here because you want to have discussed this fully with AI, and then it creates the implementation plan. For me, for this demo, I just said, can you help me visualize how this app is going to work? And I gave it free reign on what it should look like. So this is what it came up with in terms of a mockup. So this looks really basic because it's just a mockup. So it's got a login screen, it's got a bunch of different grocery lists, and then inside the list, it's got a bunch of items. And this is what an empty state looks like. And then here, after it creates this, you can go back and forth with it. Like, no, I want this to be here. I want that to be there. I want to see this feature and that. So make sure you have it exactly the way you want it. And then the next step is a design. You can ask it, okay, I like the mockup and design. I like the mockup and the screen flow or the app flow. Can you create a UI design for me and show me how these screens would look like as a finished app? Again, the more direction you can provide, the better, because it's just going to decide on a style if you don't specify one. So here I have not specified one, and it has decided on this style. Now, if this is not to your preference, that's completely fine. You can tell it to use a different preference. And this is how you can also work on a design with Claude back and forth. So I want to show you another a design for another app to give you an example. So this is like a focus timer app. I went through the same process. I asked, hey, can you create a design for me? And it used this sort of like cyber design, very futuristic techie design. I said, no, I kind of want a stoicism, atomic habits type of concept. That's this book. And then it it got exactly what I meant. You can even paste screenshots of different perhaps styles that you like. And then it created this, which was more what I had in mind. I'm like, great, this looks great. Now can you create it in put it in a screen flow for me? Oh, I said, can you put it all in different screens? So then it created this. So this would be like the onboarding screen 2, onboarding screen 3. How many sessions do you want? and it laid this out. So the good thing about it doing this is that you can actually translate this into screenshots, which you can pass to the AI to build. And I want to show you an example of that. So the lock-in app, here's what it looks like. This is the simulator, and this is the actual app. And all I did to get this was to take a screenshot of the design and send it to like give it to AI as a reference and said this is what I want this screen to look like. So it was able to style it like this. Um, yeah. So going through this discussion process, getting it to look and function exactly as you want it. Ask questions. This is where you can ask questions to understand things. No worries, Dakju. This will be recorded. Sorry, I'm going a little overtime, guys. You can then refine it to have for it to look and function exactly what you want. And then the next part is to ask it to create two files. One is Claude .md. This is like a guidelines file. I'll show you what this looks like. So this is for the lock-in app. So you can see here, it says, again, these are the guardrails that the AI should follow when it's building the app. Code should be obvious and not clever. For example, each type does one thing well, extract reusable components. For design patterns, it's got a bunch of different ones as well. Got a bunch of best practices. This is a pretty long file, actually. Structure, yeah, pretty long file on all these different things, all these different best practices. Like not to have big files and stuff like that. So then you just take this file and you put it into your project folder. You'd put it into here, and you don't have to create this every single time. I actually might just copy and paste it from my other lock-in app, for example. I can copy this, and then I can put it into here. Okay, so that's the Claude MD file, and then you create an implementation file. So then you would ask AI to say, hey, can you create, oh, this is where I kind of stopped, but you would ask it to, okay, everything we've talked about, can you create a step-by-step implementation file that I am going to use with Claude Code to build this? And it's going to create a file, which then you can also add into the folder. And this file looks like, I'll show you what it looks like. It looks something like this. This app, this Focus app is using Swift Data, a local database. So it talks about the structure for that, talks about the navigation flow, the different tasks right here. And essentially, you are just going to ask it to build the different phases one by one. You don't actually have to read this. So you can see here, here's step 12, there's step 11. So what you're going to do is just add this file also to the folder. And then when you come back to here, I'm just going to cancel this. You would reference the file. You would say, okay. So this is what I ask it to create a plan to build step 1 from, and then you can use the @ symbol to reference the different files. So I might say the requirements. Sometimes it pops up the autocomplete, sometimes it doesn't. Following at claude.md, which is that guardrails file. And it'll build step 1. And it's just going to do its thing, and it's going to modify the files in your project. Then you're going to run your project, make sure it builds, run it, test it. And if it works as expected for step 1, you're going to use source control and you're going to make a commit for step 1. You're going to lock that in before you move on to step 2. That way, if something gets messed up, you can always backtrack. And so through that process, you're going to end up with a finished step, kind of like this one right here. So as we're over time, I think this is something that this process, like actually doing it, will be something I show in the AI course that we're producing inside the here. But if you have any questions for me, let's do a little bit of Q&A before we wrap up. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks for joining. No worries. The recording will be available. All right. If you think of any questions, feel free to post it in the comment section under the recording, and we'll definitely jump in and answer it. Otherwise, this recording is available in about 6 hours, and I have some of the links here that we were mentioned in the session. All right. Thanks, Elzo. I'm glad that helped. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.